Law 20. Do not commit to anyone. Judgment. It is the fool who always rushes to take sides. Do not commit to any side or cause but yourself. By maintaining your independence, you become the master of others, playing people against one another, making them pursue you. Part I. Do not commit to anyone, but be courted by all. If you allow people to feel they possess you to any degree, you lose all power over them. By not committing your affection, they will only try harder to win you over. Stay aloof, and you gain the power that comes from their attention and frustrated desire. Play the Virgin Queen. Give them hope, but never satisfaction. Observance of the law. When Queen Elizabeth I ascended the throne of England in 1558, there was much to do about her finding a husband. The issue was debated in Parliament and was a main topic of conversation among Englishmen of all classes. They often disagreed as to whom she should marry, but everyone thought she should marry as soon as possible, for a queen must have a king and must bear heirs for the kingdom. The debates raged on for years. Meanwhile, the most handsome and eligible bachelors in the realm, Sir Robert Dudley, the Earl of Essex, and Sir Walter Raleigh, vied for Elizabeth's hand. She did not discourage them, but she seemed to be in no hurry, and her hints as to which men might be her favorite often contradicted each other. In 1566, Parliament sent a delegation to Elizabeth urging her to marry before she was too old to bear children. She did not argue, nor did she discourage the delegation, but she remained a virgin nonetheless. The delicate game that Elizabeth played with her suitors slowly made her the subject of innumerable sexual fantasies and the object of cultish worship. The court physician Simon Forman used his diary to describe his dreams of deflowering her. Painters represented her as Diana and other goddesses. The poet Edmund Spenser and others wrote eulogies to the Virgin Queen. She was referred to as the world's empress, that virtuous Virgo who rules the world and sets the stars in motion. In conversation with her, her many male suitors would employ bold sexual innuendo, a dare that Elizabeth did not discourage. She did all she could to stir their interest and simultaneously keep them at bay. Throughout Europe, kings and princes knew that a marriage with Elizabeth would seal an alliance between England and any nation. The King of Spain wooed her, as did the Prince of Sweden and the Archduke of Austria. She politely refused them all. The great diplomatic issue of Elizabeth's stay was posed by the revolt of the Flemish and Dutch lowlands, which were then possessions of Spain. Should England break its alliance with Spain and choose France as its main ally on the continent, thereby encouraging Flemish and Dutch independence? By 1570, it had come to seem that an alliance with France would be England's wisest course. France had two eligible men of noble blood, the Dukes of Anjou and Alençon, brothers of the French king. Would either of them marry Elizabeth? Both had advantages, and Elizabeth kept the hopes of both alive. The issue simmered for years. The Duke of Anjou made several visits to England, kissed Elizabeth in public, and even called her by pet names. She appeared to requite his affections. Meanwhile, as she flirted with the two brothers, a treaty was signed that sealed peace between France and England. By 1582, Elizabeth felt she could break off the courtship. In the case of the Duke of Anjou in particular, she did so with great relief. For the sake of diplomacy, she had allowed herself to be courted by a man whose presence she could not stand and whom she found physically repulsive. Once peace between France and England was secure, she dropped the unctuous Duke as politely as she could. By this time, Elizabeth was too old to bear children. She was accordingly able to live the rest of her life as she desired, and she died the Virgin Queen. She left no direct heir but ruled through a period of incomparable peace and cultural fertility. Interpretation: Elizabeth had good reason not to marry. She had witnessed the mistakes of Mary Queen of Scots, her cousin. Resisting the idea of being ruled by a woman, the Scots expected Mary to marry and marry wisely. To wed a foreigner would be unpopular. To favor any particular noble house would open up terrible rivalries. In the end, Mary chose Lord Darnley, a Catholic. In doing so, she incurred the wrath of Scotland's Protestants, and endless turmoil ensued. Elizabeth knew that marriage could often lead to a female ruler's undoing, and by marrying and committing to an alliance with one party or nation, the queen becomes embroiled in conflicts that are not of her choosing, conflicts which may eventually overwhelm her or lead her into a futile war. Also, the husband becomes the de facto ruler and often tries to do away with his wife, the queen, as Darnley tried to get rid of Mary. Elizabeth learned the lesson well. She had two goals as a ruler: to avoid marriage and to avoid war. She managed to combine these goals by dangling the possibility of marriage in order to forge alliances. The moment she committed to any single suitor would have been the moment she lost her power. She had to emanate mystery and desirability, never discouraging anyone's hopes but never yielding. Through this lifelong game of flirting and withdrawing, Elizabeth dominated the country and every man who sought to conquer her. As the center of attention, she was in control. Keeping her independence above all, Elizabeth protected her power and made herself an object of worship. I would rather be a beggar and single than a queen and married. Queen Elizabeth I, 1533 to 1603, keys to power. Since power depends greatly on appearances, you must learn the tricks that will enhance your image. Refusing to commit to a person or group is one of these. When you hold yourself back, you incur not anger but a kind of respect. You instantly seem powerful because you make yourself ungraspable rather than succumbing to the group or to the relationship as most people do. This aura of power only grows with time. As your reputation for independence grows, more and more people will come to desire you, wanting to be the one who gets you to commit. Desire is like a virus. If we see that someone is desired by other people, we tend to find this person desirable too. The moment you commit, the magic is gone. You become like everyone else. People will try all kinds of underhanded methods to get you to commit. They will give you gifts and shower you with favors, all to put you under obligation. Encourage the attention and stimulate their interest, but do not commit at any cost. Accept the gifts and favors if you so desire, but be careful to maintain your inner aloofness. You cannot inadvertently allow yourself to feel obligated to anyone. Remember, though, the goal is not to put people off or to make it seem that you are incapable of commitment. Like the Virgin Queen, you need to stir the pot, excite interest, and lure people with the possibility of having you. You have to bend to their attention occasionally then, but never too far. The Greek soldier and statesman Alcibiades played this game to perfection. It was Alcibiades who inspired and led the massive Athenian armada that invaded Sicily in 414 BC when envious Athenians back home tried to bring him down by accusing him of trumped-up charges. He defected to the enemy, the Spartans, instead of facing a trial back home. Then, after the Athenians were defeated at Syracuse, he left Sparta for Persia, even though the power of Sparta was now on the rise. Now, however, the Athenians and the Spartans courted Alcibiades because of his influence on the Persians. The Persians showered him with honors because of his power over the Athenians and the Spartans. He made promises to every side but committed to none, and in the end, he held all the cards. If you aspire to power and influence, try the Alcibiades tactic. Put yourself in the middle between competing powers. Lower one side with the promise of your help. The other side, always wanting to outdo the enemy, will pursue you as well. As each side vies for your attention, you will immediately seem a person of great influence and desirability. More power will accrue to you than if you had rashly committed to one side. To perfect this tactic, you need to keep yourself inwardly free from emotional entanglements and to view all those around you as pawns in your rise to the top. You cannot let yourself become the lackey for any cause. In the midst of the 1968 U.S. presidential election, Henry Kissinger made a phone call to Richard Nixon's team. Kissinger had been allied with Nelson Rockefeller, who had unsuccessfully sought the Republican nomination. Now Kissinger offered to supply the Nixon camp with valuable information on the negotiations for peace in Vietnam that were then going on in Paris. He had a man on the negotiating team keeping him informed of the latest developments. The Nixon team gladly accepted his offer. At the same time, however, Kissinger also approached the Democratic nominee, Hubert Humphrey, and offered his aid. The Humphrey people asked him for inside information on Nixon, and he supplied it. Look, Kissinger told Humphrey's people, I've hated Nixon for years. He had no interest in either side. What he wanted was what he got, the promise of a high-level cabinet post from both Nixon and Humphrey. Whichever man won the election, Kissinger's career was secure. The winner, of course, was Nixon, and Kissinger duly went on to his cabinet post. Even so, he was careful never to appear too much of a Nixon man. When Nixon was re-elected in 1972, men much more loyal to him than Kissinger were fired. Kissinger was also the only Nixon high official to survive Watergate and serve under the next president, Gerald Ford. While maintaining a little distance, he thrived in turbulent times. Those who use this strategy often notice a strange phenomenon. People who rush to the support of others tend to gain little respect in the process, for their help is so easily obtained, while those who stand back find themselves besieged with supplicants. Their aloofness is powerful, and everyone wants them on their side. When Picasso, after early years of poverty, became the most successful artist in the world, he did not commit himself to this dealer or that dealer, although they now besieged him from all sides with attractive offers and grand promises. Instead, he appeared to have no interest in their services. This technique drove them wild, and as they fought over him, his prices only rose. When Henry Kissinger, as U.S. Secretary of State, wanted to reach détente with the Soviet Union, He made no concessions or conciliatory gestures, but courted China instead. This infuriated and also scared the Soviets. They were already politically isolated and feared further isolation if the United States and China came together. Kissinger's move pushed them to the negotiating table. The tactic has a parallel in seduction. When you want to seduce a woman, Stendhal advises, court her sister first, stay aloof, and people will come to you. It will become a challenge for them to win your affection. As long as you imitate the wise Virgin Queen and stimulate their hopes, you will remain a magnet of attention and desire. Image, the Virgin Queen, the center of attention, desire, and worship, never succumbing to one suitor or the other. The Virgin Queen keeps them all revolving around her like planets, unable to leave her orbit but never getting any closer to her. Authority. Do not commit yourself to anybody or anything, for that is to be a slave to every man. Above all, keep yourself free of commitments and obligations. They are the device of another to get you into his power. Baltasar Gracian, 1601 to 1658.